Untitled Shephard, and Social Media Savvy, SMS, there's a little acronym in there. And the reason I've been doing research on social media, and what I thought was is that there's kind of a lot of, what I noticed was is that people keep goofing off, they keep messing up, and I do as well. And it struck me that we have, in order to drive a car, we have to take a test, but we can just go buy these phones and we're off. And we make all these errors that some of them we're aware of, because we find out the following day, or we might lose our jobs, or various people might respond differently to the things we do. But there's lots of other things that we might not see, and I've seen all these things from studying social media. So if we go back to the good old days, and in the good old days, I've got these kind of images here of, I didn't actually have to hear if someone was being rude or horrible, because they were doing it in their house. I'd be walking past their house, I wouldn't have to see them swearing or doing whatever else. Nowadays, I might hear about it on social media. The other thing is we used to all receive edited, top-down news. There were very few channels, and we all went to work or went to school, and we discussed the same kind of programs that we had all watched. Today, I'm going to say in the grim today's, is we can go off in little wormholes, and we don't connect possibly as much when we arrive at school or when we arrive at the workplace, because we have different interests and we focus on those interests, and we don't rely so much on the top-down media. Now, it's not all grim. What we found in our research was that, I've been studying this since the Scottish independence referendum. There were some wonderful posts online where we could find out about government publications, we could find out what different sides were thinking, and you found out things that you might not have come across before. You can see what academics are up to and what their latest research is. And so actually, as an educational tool and resource, it's been absolutely fantastic if you know where to look. Our research found that it's a minority activity. Less than 5% of posts out there tend to have some of the bad features that I'm going to be talking about today. But what we do know is that governments and schools and political parties are increasingly interested in what can we do about this. There are several committees involved in investigating these things right now that I've been involved with. I'm going to the Scottish Parliament next week to talk about this too. And so what I did is I came up with kind of F's to avoid, 5 F's to avoid, and then 5 F's to be aware of. And I'd like to take you through those today. So it's going to be a bit of an F diet this afternoon. I'm going to start with a quick recap of the 5 F's to avoid. The first one is the foul, which is probably the one we all don't like getting if someone is swearing and tweeting back and being nasty. The foul also includes, and this is a recap because you're getting a greatest hits. My TED Talk 1 covered these 5 points, but I'd like to talk about all of the greatest hits of the things that I'm going to be talking about today, including another 5 on F's to think about. So the foul talks about bad language, but it also goes further than this. We're talking trolls, we're talking bullying, we're talking bad behaviour online, which none of us want to be in receipt of. Flaming is when we go over the top. We often use lots of uppercase language. We use exclamation marks, multiple exclamation marks, multiple question marks, lots of uppercase flaming language. We can all probably think of a leader in the Western world who is guilty of some of this stuff. I could sing Rocket Man, but I won't do that. False and fake, we need to think about false. Just because you find one gender does an action, or one person of a gender who does an action, it doesn't mean that all of that gender drive like that, or are like that. The same is true with, just because you spot one English person who is really horrible, it does not mean that all English people are really horrible. I promise. So we need to avoid kind of these fallacious posts where we find one thing that we don't like and then we aggregate up to that group. And then also this connects with the whole idea of fake news, that actually what we're doing or spreading we need to be careful about, and I'll come back to this idea of fake when we talk about facts in a little bit more detail. The foggy, one of my friends this week got she said, I was told I had sick hair. online. I don't know what this means. And then someone from a younger generation piped in and said, actually that means you've got a really cool haircut. It's sick, is the way of saying it. So, but that doesn't, if you're saying to somebody they've got sick hair, there might be people online of all different generations reading that, thinking that your hair is severely damaged or burned. When actually it might not be severely damaged or burned, it's just a really cool haircut. So think about, when you are online, it's okay when you're in little groups to communicate with said language, if you all understand each other. I mean, I make up words. Do you know what fabulinquent means? No. Well, what it means to me is it's 50% fabulous and 50% delinquent. So it's fabulous with a touch of naughty, and I quite like that word. And I use it all the time with my friends, but I will not post something on social media, hopefully I won't, talking about how fabulinquent I am, or how fabulinquent my garden is, or whatever. You'll see this in a minute. And so be careful with foggy when you're communicating with people. Flannel, hopefully I'm not guilty of that right now, is when you just go on and on and on and on with the same point. And what we noticed was that people do not like it when people make the same point over and over and over. Particularly one person who, in our research, said, okay, I've made this point 21 times, I will not make it again. And then 5 minutes later, they came in and made it again. And so that can really annoy people if you go on and on and on. Actually, there's probably leaders in the world who do all these things all at once. Today, I'd like to focus on the F's to be aware of. So this kind of, the first one I'd like to look at is followers. And followers, in the United Kingdom, for example, we have 53 million people living in England and 5.3 million living in Scotland. So it can look, if you're on a website like the BBC and you're having a discussion and you're posting comments on the Have Your Say thread on the BBC, it can look, if you're living in Scotland, like you are completely outnumbered, 10 to 1. And that is just if there is a proportional response. Now, if there are a ratio of 5 to 2, it can still look like the Scottish are being outnumbered by the English, when actually there could be a disproportionate, in terms of population, response from the Scottish population versus the English population. So we need to think about population numbers, we need to think about all the different types of followers that are out there. So when we're attaching a comment to a hashtag, who are the people who make up that hashtag? So hashtag IndieRef, hashtag EURef, are these mixtures of 50-50 groups of people, or are they swayed more 10 to 1? What is the ratio of followers that are taking place? This also happens with our Facebook accounts. We probably all, most of us will probably have Facebook accounts which are imbalanced politically. There's probably very few of us in here who have, half of my friends are on the left and then half of my friends are on the right. We probably have imbalances. And if we don't have imbalances, we make imbalances by the choices and the things that we click on when we like certain articles, which can mean that the algorithms take us down to these imbalances. So even if we've got a balanced set of friends, we don't have a balanced set of news stories that's coming our way, because the things we get to see are the things that we think that the media companies think that we might like. So we might end up, even though we try for balance, we might end up with imbalance of our followers. The second one is facts. And what was really interesting about the Scottish independence referendum was that the two groups that were interviewed, there were some focus groups done as well, and the two of the groups, there were the activists, yes campaigners, the activists, no campaigners, there were the general no voters, general yes voters, so 4 different groups, but what they all wanted were facts. And they all found these facts in different places. Some people found facts on websites that they were approved of, and other people disliked other news organisations because they didn't like the facts that they were receiving. So different people found facts in different places, but everybody thought that they could find facts. And I think we need to be really careful here. And if you think about the EURef, in the UK, one of the big promises was that we're spending £350 million on Europe every week. But what we need to do is look at the counter argument and work out, well, do we get any of that 350 back in the form of structural funds, grants, and so on? And we need to be doing this constant fact-checking and cross-checking, maybe reading a left-wing paper, reading a right-wing paper, looking at what people on different sides are saying about these particular issues to try and work out what is a fact and what is not a fact. And even when we think we've got a fact, we might also want to think about long-term range of facts. We might know what the oil price is today. We might be making a voting choice based on the oil price of today. But let's look at the oil prices over the last 10 years or over the last 20 years. What could happen tomorrow might not be the situation for today. And do the political parties tell us what these worst case scenario versus best case scenarios are when we're making our particular choices at the ballot box? So think really critically about facts that you're receiving. The next one, fashion. And this is the idea that just because loads of people online are loving everything you do, liking what you're doing, it doesn't mean that they are representative of the population. And you might actually just be attracting a small bubble and clique of people, and they may not be representative of the other groups that are in society. So the group there with 2 might actually be in the majority when it comes to public opinion, but when it comes to online, the fashion would suggest that online that group is larger. So in my research, we looked at the top 2 lines there pertain to Facebook data across a long campaign period during the Scottish independence referendum. And you can see the top line there is for Facebook likes for the yes side, yes to independence. The second line there that I'm going to focus on, the bottom 2 lines are to do with Twitter, and they're in a similar kind of ratio to the top 2 lines. But the top 2 lines there show that the yes side was ahead online, and it surged ahead online during the campaign period, and the no to independence side did not do very well online. But actually the result was 55 no to independence and 45 yes to independence. So the result did not mirror the fashion of what was taking place online. So we need to be careful about the difference between online publics and offline publics, because they may not be the same. The next part I'd like to talk about is filtering. And this can be self-filtering, so there might be certain groups in society who feel vulnerable and they do not wish to partake online in social media because they do not feel that they're in a safe space. So some people might feel more safe to comment than others, and we need to look at ways we can try and make spaces safe so that different groups can get involved. This might be different nationalities who fear that their states will persecute them if they return home and they have been partaking online and talking about things of interest to them that might not cause us grief in the West. It might also be that we are constrained, we are filtered by, and what our research showed, when we were looking at longest forum spaces where people could talk, they were able to talk about the issues. When you're confined to 140 characters, this can have a filtering effect. That means you cannot do more than talk about whether you agree with somebody or disagree with somebody, and you can't go into the issues in the kind of depth that you want to go into unless you're kind of rolling those tweets. So we need to think about what kind of platforms we're engaging with, what are the rules of engagement that they tell us we will be included or excluded, what's the space we can talk in, and also are there groups out there that we're not hearing from because they don't feel that they can get involved. So that whole theory of kind of a spiral of silence, maybe some groups aren't getting engaged. The final one I want to talk about is fallout, and there's fallout here for the person making the nasty comments or getting engaged. They might lose their jobs, they might lose respect, they might lose their families, whatever else, if they really mess up online. But it's also the people that they are doing this to. I think we need to think, we've heard a lot about empathy today, and I think empathy and we've also heard about kindness. These are important things to think about. And when we are engaging online, we need to think about how we can be empathetic, how we can be kind, so that none of us want to be in a position where we are crying. Why do we want to make other people feel bad or in that particular position? And then there's also the fallout in terms of the natures of our polities and the natures of the parliaments that represent us. I would like us to have parliaments that represent us according to all the different groups that are in society. If some members of society are increasingly not wanting to stand as political candidates, if women are perceiving that they get more attacks online than men, and our research showed that they did get more negativity than men as well, so it's not just a perception, it's a reality, then we might be in a situation where fewer women are standing for parliament. I don't want to be in a parliament. I don't want to be represented by parliamentarians who are just who only include the hard-nosed people who do not mind if they get abuse online. So we need to seriously think about what we are doing to our societies and to our policies. Very, very finally, I'd like to talk about if you're facing a crisis or you're in a drama. We all know that you probably shouldn't drink and drive. We know that you definitely shouldn't drink and drive. You probably shouldn't drink and dial on the telephone. We know that from a famous film. And I'm just going to add to that, if you're doing drama, don't digit. If you're drinking, you might not want to digit. And if you do drugs, don't digit. And this is it just in pictorial format. So if you're flipped, and slightly losing it, you're getting a bit merry. If you're fried, you're away with the fairies. Or if you're furious, or we can have tipsy tweeting, tank tweeting, totally lost it tweeting. You might want to engage in another activity. Indeed, I think we probably all need a digital detox. I get involved, I do volunteer work in the local garden. This is my garden. And it is nice to do something other than just social media, and this makes me happy as well. It gives me a bit of balance. The irony of this is, though, that my garden would never look that good if I didn't have a social media platform to share it on, because I want people to like my garden. So the irony is I'm engaged in the good old days, but it's all connected to the good todays, and the good todays can be today, and I hope we can take this forward and make it better world. Thank you very much.